with that, I'd like to welcome Byron Conroy all the way from Iceland with a presentation on wide angle. So welcome, Byron.
Good morning, as it is for me. So it's 2 o'clock in the morning for me, 2:02, just turned. So thank you for having me. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, we can all see the screen. Good.
Yes.
All right, excellent. So one of your lovely members, Linda, I met her in the Solomon Islands last year in November, and she was very kind enough to ask me to come and talk to you guys. So it's my pleasure to discuss wide angle. And then later on, earlier this year, I also met Paul, another one of your members. So it just shows how small the diving world is. People in a 7-hour time difference and meeting on all sorts of different trips across the world. But this talk is about wide angle photography. And I just want to get you thinking about your wide angle images and just thinking about making big images. And it's a lot about technique. So the techniques that we're going to discuss, you can use them anywhere that you go diving. Okay, so the talk is not aimed at one location, but giving you all the techniques and all the decision-making process you need to take your wide angle photos to the next level. If you've got any questions, guys, please just either write them in the text box or just write them down in front of you, and then we'll go on to all the questions at the end as well. Okay? So first of all, a little bit about me. This is the most boring slide of the presentation, hopefully, for you. I'm an underwater photographer based in Reykjavik in Iceland, and I've been here since 2015, so 10 years. And 15 years ago, I left the UK with just my PADI Open Water certificate. I work as a photojournalist for Scuba Diving Magazine Group, but I do have a real job as well, guys, because unfortunately the underwater photo world is not the best for your personal economic standing. So I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Arctic Adventures, which is Iceland's largest adventure tourism company. I'm also the founder of InsideScuba.online with a very good friend of mine, Andy Deitch. And I would really recommend that you guys subscribe to it. It is a newsletter and it's a non-biased newsletter. So pretty much all the scuba things that you can read about these days are sponsored by different companies. This is just two underwater photographers writing articles about what we think about different products and different techniques for underwater photography. So please feel free to subscribe to that. I'm also an expedition leader for all sorts of different trips, especially in the cold water areas such as the Arctic and Antarctic and Iceland as well. These days, I like to teach wide angle photography, macro workshops, all that kind of stuff in different locations all over the Middle East, Asia, Indo-Pacific, and any of the best diving spots you can think of. I'm also a tech diver, so I'm a JJ CCR Mod 3 diver, an advanced open circuit trimix instructor, a master instructor, tech instructor. However, I will tell you today that I do hate teaching diving these days. I've done way too much teaching diving, and I much prefer teaching people photography these days. I've probably done 5,000 dives in, I think, 47 countries, and I target 2 new countries per year, as long as I've visited all my other familiar locations as well. Usually I go to Lembeh every year and many other different types of places, but at least 2 new ones per year. Okay, so you can contact me. I have a really easy email address. So if you've ever got any photo questions, I love talking about photos. So just email me on byron@adventures.com. And I have an Instagram account with 1,500 photos taken all over the world for you guys to have a look at as well. This is Inside Scuba. So this is the website with all the different articles that you can read. There are all sorts of different photo stuff, some of them by me, some by my friend Andy. You can see here our friend Alex Mustard has done a few. We have a lot of different guest authors coming in for the publication as well. So let's get to wide angle. Before you even think about taking wide angle, you really need to think about what you're trying to achieve. So wide angle shooting, it's all about connecting the viewer to the underwater world. It's about telling a story of what you can see in just one single frame, okay? Of all the types of underwater photography you do, this is your chance to show the beauty, the wonder, and the astonishment and the scale of the underwater world. These images will be the most powerful images in your whole collection. A good wide angle photo will resonate with the viewer, and it is timeless. Now, when you're shooting wide angle, please don't think about your diving friends and how to impress them. Think about non-divers and how you tell a non-diver the story of what you're seeing underwater, okay? Whenever I think about what I'm doing underwater with my camera wide angle wise, I always think about my 8-year-old nephew. How can I convey to my 8-year-old nephew who's never been underwater just how magic it is what I'm seeing? And you've only got one opportunity to do this in one frame. However, good wide angle images, they take a little bit of luck. Okay, in comparison to macro, they need a magic moment. They need a little something special. They're a little bit less about camera trickery than macro, and it's the most authentic way that you can shoot. In order to make the most of the magic moment when it comes, though, you really need to understand your technique and have all the foundational basics ready so that you can just shoot when you get the magic moment. A little bit about equipment. I'm not going to go too much into equipment. My personal camera is a Sony a7R Mark V. I believe a full frame camera is the best way to go for high quality images, but it's not really necessary for every single shooter. There's a few different lenses that you need for wide angle, but ultimately you need a fisheye lens, which is just a really wide lens. I use a Canon 8-15 fisheye, and I also use a Nikonos 13mm fisheye. This image here on the top right is just to show you how small the Nikonos 13mm fisheye is in comparison to a regular fisheye dome, which is why I like to shoot the Nikonos 13mm so often, even though it's probably 25, 30 years old as a lens, but you can adapt it to the new cameras. I also recommend some kind of wide angle zoom, like a Nauticam WACP. That's probably the best quality lens I use for big animal shooting. There is a Nauticam FCP now as well, which I've just bought recently, but it can't do some of the techniques and doesn't quite have as good image quality as the other lenses. However, though, the most important thing in your arsenal is actually your lighting. It is far more important than any camera you'll buy or anything like that. If you're going to take high quality wide angle images, the one thing that is in every single frame is your strobe light. You need to invest the money in the best quality, highest power, softest, cleanest light you can buy. My personal strobe preference is the Retro Pro Max. They just released a new edition, the Retro Pro Max 2, came out on the 30th of June, and mine just arrived this week, so I have the new version of those as well. So how do we do it? It's actually about your decision-making process. So you need to know a myriad of different techniques and the reasons why you would apply those techniques on any given scene. And we're going to run through these techniques next, okay? Learn the techniques, know when to implement them, and make the right decisions based on the story you're trying to sell. So think about what the image that you're trying to create and the story you're trying to tell your viewer, and then apply the correct technique for it. Ultimately, once you know the techniques, then you create depth in your images by starting to combine multiple techniques together. So let's have a look at the techniques we need to master. The first and the most important technique is the one that most people forget about the most. It is to master ambient light. Ambient light is the strongest form of light there is, yet it is the one we think about the least. In wide-angle images, it's highly unlikely you can remove ambient light from the scene. When you shoot in macro, very often we try and shoot black backgrounds and we remove the ambient light. But with wide angle, you're going to need to learn to master it before you can do anything else. And there's two different ways to use it. You can either shoot with the light or against the light. And when we say we're going to shoot with the light, it means the light from the sun is coming from behind you and filling the scene in front of you with that lovely soft light that's coming from behind. So you're shooting with the light in the same direction. Or you can shoot against the light. So the light is coming in from in front of you, where you'll get much higher contrast in your images with very strong highlights and very strong shadows. The image on the left here, it's shot against the light with the strong highlights and the very dark shadows. The first thing I do whenever I get in the water, I literally roll off the boat and I look immediately where the sun is, okay? Because that is my go-to for the underwater settings I'm going to use. Usually when you're diving, you're going to dive in one direction. It's usually something like follow the reef, keep the reef on your right shoulder. So immediately know where the sun is. Is the sun in front of you or is it behind you? Then I have two sets of settings of my camera, one for shooting with the light and one for shooting behind. Okay? And it will also tell me, do I need to swim forwards or backwards? Do I want to use the light of the sun to help me light my scene, or do I want to shoot against it? All strobe lighting is simply supplemental to the ambient light. It's the ambient light that drives all of the settings that you use, and then you just adjust your strobe power later on afterwards. The shutter speed is how you control ambient light. So the longer your shutter speed is open, the more ambient light you let into the scene, and the brighter the color of the blue water will be. So shutter speed dictates the color of the blues in your images. Okay? Open the shutter speed, have it open longer, the blue will become brighter. Have it much faster, and the blue will become darker. Okay? Always measure your exposure based upon the blues before you even worry about strobe light. Now, modern mirrorless cameras, I don't know if anyone's using modern mirrorless cameras, but they're really good for this because they give you a settings effect. So when you look through the viewfinder, the color of the blue changes as you change the settings. It's like what you see is what you get, which is really the biggest advantage of using modern mirrorless cameras. So as soon as I get in the water, I understand my settings for shooting with the light and against the light. And these are just some examples. These photos here, they're only taken with ambient light, okay? And they're both pretty deep. The one on the left is probably 25 meters deep, and the one on the right is probably around 20 meters, something like that. So 60 feet to 75 feet, somewhere in that kind of range. On both these photos, if you actually stop and look at them, the sun is coming from the top right of the photos, okay? And it's coming diagonally across the scene. And it's lighting the side of the shipwreck and catching the front. You cannot take these images unless you learn to use the ambient light and understand the direction it's coming from. If the light was coming from the other side, I would move my entire shooting to the other side of the wreck and use the light. Using the sunlight gives you the contrast in the image. It puts the color into the wreck and it gives you all this fine detail that you get in the image. If you're going to shoot these type of scenes against the light, you're probably going to want to turn them into black and white images. And again, these are where we're shooting against the light. So in the previous ones, we're using the light to help us. Now we're shooting with the light right in front of us. When you shoot these kind of scenes, you'll get a really contrasty image, dark shadows, really bright highlights, and often you'll get these sunbursts into the image as well. These type of images, they work very well with more monotone colors, okay? So they look very good in black and white, they look very good in less color palette across the scene. And again here, we're working with angled light. So the light is coming in from the left, it is lighting the right-hand wall, it's creating a shadow on the left side of the image. But by understanding the light, I expose in the right way, and I also put my model in the right position. The model is on the edge of the light, but in the light and facing into the light, okay? All my negative space in the image is into the light, okay? But the light is drawing your eye across through the scene. It's all about thinking where the ambient light is coming before you press the shutter. And again here, the final two with the ambient light, the one on the left here, the light is coming from behind me and it's naturally lighting these sea lions and this bait ball. On the other one, the light is coming diagonally across in front of me through the image and I get a much more contrasty image. So once you've got your ambient light, it's all about the strobe light. I would say strobe lighting for wide angle images is actually relatively easy, provided you've got a very high quality strobe light. My personal choice, like I said before, is the Retro Pro Max, primarily because they're very high powered and they have a circular flash tube. And it's this circular flash tube that gives me soft and even lighting. Buying expensive high quality strobes is the biggest differentiator you can make in your images if you just wanted to buy one thing. So forget about buying a new camera, a new lens, or anything like that. Buying high quality strobes will make the biggest difference to you. Once you've got them, your go-to position should be this kind of 10 and 2 position up here. That's where our strobe should go, and they should go nice and behind the dome port. So when you put your eye to the camera, the strobe should actually be level with your ears, if not slightly behind them. And once you've done this, it's pretty easy. You actually just move the strobes in and out, closer and further away from the dome port. So as you get closer to the subject, the strobes come in closer to your ears. As you go further away, the strobes go out wide. Okay? And then the same goes for the power. As you get closer to the subject, you turn the power down. As you get further away from the subject, you turn the power up. Now, there are unusual strobe positions for unusual scenes. If you're trying to only light a certain part of the subject, but not throw the light forwards onto the wall behind, just like this image on the left, we use something called inward lighting. So we take our 10 and 2 position and we point the strobes facing back at our own head. And the idea here is that we only use the edge of the beam just to kiss the front of the coral, not throw the light behind it, okay? So it's really good to practice this and just try and light something that's sticking out a little bit from a wall, but not light the wall itself. So you take your strobes, point them back at the housing, and just use the edge of the beam to kiss the coral in this case. And the final strobe position that you really need to think about with wide angle is when you're shooting a very flat scene. So if the scene in front of you is very flat and extends out in front of you, you want to throw the light across that scene as far forward as you can. We use this rabbit ears position that you can see on the left here. So by putting the strobes up in the air, still behind the dome port, but up in the air, the light will throw forwards. So if you look at this image here on the right, the diver is quite far from the camera in comparison to the foreground, but we've still got the strobe light on the diver. By putting them up in the air, we throw that light forward and across the scene. Okay? And you can use semi-rabbit ears, just bring them down a little bit and anywhere in between, just depending on how far you're trying to throw the light. So we've got our ambient light and we've got our strobe light. The quickest way now to transform your wide-angle images into something very special is to use sunballs and sun rays. Now, it's very easy to identify before you go diving whether you're going to see sun rays and sunballs or not. You're looking for really bright sunny days with very calm surfaces. So the calmer the surface, the better the sunballs and the sun rays will be. And obviously the sun needs to be out to give you sunballs and sun rays as well. It's much better to shoot them early in the morning or late in the afternoon. So when you go on a liveaboard, that first dive of the day or that last dive of the day, all your mind should be thinking about is sunballs, 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 sunballs. I just get really excited when the sea is calm and the sun is out, early morning, late afternoon. Avoid shooting sunballs in the midday sun. It doesn't work because the sun is too powerful and it's too high above you, so you're not going to get any sun rays as well. Use f13 or higher to ensure that the rays are nice and sharp through your image. You can also manage the color of the water by using your shutter speed. So you're probably going to need a very fast shutter speed, around 1/250th, and a low ISO as well. Okay? But by having a low ISO, you're having a shutter speed of 1/250th and using f13 or higher, it means a lot of light is being blocked from the scene. And this has the same effect on your strobe lighting. So when you're doing this, one mistake people make is they don't have the strobes up high enough. So you're going to be surprised how much strobe power you need in order to correct this, to get the right exposure of the sun rays at the same time. You can also manage the sun by clipping it. So if the sun is still a little bit too bright, you can just put it very much on the top of the frame and just have the top third with sun rays through it. So just clip the sun outside of the frame. Or you can hide the sunball behind the subject if you need to. So if the sun is too bright for you to manage it fully with your settings, put the subject directly in front of the sunball and you get the lovely backlit effect around him. It's very important to stay super shallow when you do this. So when I go for a late afternoon dive, everyone does the same thing. They roll off the boat, they go straight down to 60 feet. I go straight down to 10 feet, 20 feet max, and I just stay there and play with the sun rays and play with the sunballs. And as underwater photographers, you'll be really grateful that everyone else just dives down to 60 feet and you've got all that surface up above you to play with on your own. So here's a couple more examples. The one on the left here, this is what I mean by clipping the light, okay? So you can just clip the top of the sun out of your image and just use the sun rays and have them falling over the reef here. This photo on the left was actually taken in the Solomon Islands on the trip I was with Linda. The next one here on the right, this is about on the edge for a sunball. So if the sunball was much brighter than this, then I would have to block the sunball by putting the turtle directly in front of it. But I actually really like this image the way it is and the way the sun is coming out over the reef. But it just takes your images to the next level, just by understanding the ambient light and then understanding the foreground strobe light. Same here, this one on the top left with the shark. The sun was pretty bright still, but we had wonderful sun rays because we were diving in really shallow water with a really calm surface. So just by clipping the sun out of the image, I just get these sun rays coming down on top of the shark. This was at Tiger Beach in the Bahamas. Next one up here in the top right, this is again, we're just clipping that sunball, just taking it out of the frame, and we're using maximum strobe power here. So although we're shooting in the middle of the daytime, people always think that you need stronger strobe power when you're shooting in the dark. It's actually the opposite. The brighter the sun is, the more harsh your settings are to manage the sun, and the more powerful your strobe light needs to be. The one on the bottom right is just to show you the only way where you can capture sun rays in the daytime and midday is if you shoot straight down. So if the sun is coming from directly above you at midday, straight down through the ocean, if you point the camera directly down, you will get these nice sun rays refracting from the bottom of the ocean. And this is actually a bride's whale. So it's a bride's whale that was feeding on a bait ball. And then as he dived down, I just took a shot of his tail diving down into the blue. Next one for you is Snell's window. So Snell's window is a optical phenomenon that allows for shooters to start to see a full circular view of the top side. If you angle your camera past 96 degrees towards the surface, from 96 to 180, the window will just get bigger and bigger until it's a full circle when you're pointing your camera straight up at the surface. So you can either shoot it as a full Snell's window, and that's exactly what this image is here on the left. This is taken in Florida, where they get the manatees. And I just thought, wow, it's a beautiful day. The sun is out and the trees above me look beautiful. So I pointed the camera straight back up. But this is full Snell's window. It only really works if there's a lot of stuff on the surface. So it can work in a mangrove forest. It can work like here where there's a lot of trees around you. Well, it's actually better if you use a partial Snell's window. So you imagine if just the top third of your image has a Snell's window, that's the way to use it more effectively in your images. When composing the image, you need to expose for the surface. So again, we're going to use these low ISOs, a slow aperture of f18, f22, 1/250th of a second. That also means the bottom half of your image, or the underwater part of your image, will be heavily underexposed, and it's going to need a lot of strobe light to compensate for that. Similar to the sunballs, it works really well on calm seas, nice and flat, bright sunny days, and in shallow water. Now you can try and frame your subject behind the window, or use this partial window that we just discussed before. And here's a couple of examples. Okay, this one here on the left, I shot this up in Cuba, and I shot it in the middle of the daytime. So everyone was just over to my left, and they're all going crazy with all the sharks that were feeding around them. I was just on my own with my camera pointed straight up at the surface, and everyone was wondering what on earth I was doing. But I was exposing for the sun. Okay, once I got my exposure correct, I dialed my strobes up to full power, and I waited for a shark to swim into the scene exactly how I wanted it and hit the bottom of the shark with full strobe power. Now the one on the right, this is a little bit different. So this is taken in a very low light environment. It's actually a sunset silky shark dive where the sharks are getting fed on the surface. And I was just on the surface pretty much with them, maybe 3 feet underneath the water. And I used a slow shutter speed, okay? So we're using a slow shutter speed to burn in the sunlight that's coming from the sunset. And it gives us these lovely purple and orange hues that are coming in through the sunset and creates the nice motion and the texture in the surface. And again, we've hit the strobes to get this lovely freeze action from the sharks and get the nice white color coming out of the shark. Couple more Snell's window. The one on the left, this is probably 3/4 of a Snell's window. And again, my strobes are on full power because I'm really trying to light the belly of these fish, these jackfish that are circling around. I really like the heart shape that they were swimming around. And that was the story of the image for me, these jacks swirling around rather than shooting them from the side. I decided to shoot them from underneath, full strobe power, light up the bellies of the fish, otherwise they would all be silhouettes. And similar with this lionfish, the lionfish was in an awkward place. It was a little bit tricky to shoot, but by putting the camera directly underneath, firing the strobe light underneath him, and exposing for the Snell's window, we get a lot more powerful image. The manta ray here on the right, this was taken in Rajampat. It was in really terrible conditions, so the visibility was probably 12 feet, 15 feet at the most. But by getting really close to the manta ray and exposing for the surface and using the Snell's window, it actually turned very bad conditions into a much more dynamic photo. The one in the middle here, this is my local dive site. So this is in Sofrafjörður in Iceland, where you dive between the tectonic plates, okay? And the story of the image here is that you're diving in between the clearest water in the world, where the visibility is often 300 feet. So you're trying to create the feeling that the snorkeler, in this case, is floating in midair, even though it's filled with water. So by using the Snell's window, we get that effect of the story. Okay, let's have a little talk about splits. I would say split level photography, it's love or hate. Some people adore it, some people can't stand it. I would say I'm a little bit indifferent on it, but I don't do too much of it. It is very, very easy if you understand how to do a split. It's very easy to take it, okay? This one was shot in Pig Bay in the Bahamas. I don't know if anyone's been there. So these little pigs, they're all getting fed in the ocean. So you just sat in 3 feet of water taking these photos. So the first thing you're going to need is a wide angle lens, preferably a fisheye, and the largest dome port that you have. So I usually use an 8.5-inch acrylic dome port. And I like the acrylic one because it's much lighter in the water and it floats better than the glass ones. You can't use water contact optics, so FCPs, WACPs, WWLs, all these kind of things. They do not work for taking splits because they can't focus on the top and the bottom of the image at the same time. Okay, set your camera to f22. That's the first thing that you do. Then underwater, point your camera at your own fin, which is around about 6 feet away from you, and press the shutter so the camera autofocuses. If you use back button focus, just focus on your fin. Then turn the focus of the camera off. Forget about focusing your camera ever again. Because when you're at f22 with a fisheye lens, with a 6 feet pre-focus distance, everything will be sharp on your image. Everything from the front to the back, and everything from below the water to above the water. So the big problem people do, they leave the autofocus on. The camera's always hunting for the autofocus. It doesn't know if it should focus on the above or the below or so on and so forth. Pre-focus your camera and turn the focus off. Next thing you do, you set your exposure for the brightest part of the image, which is the surface, okay? It also means the bottom half will likely be quite dark, so you can use plenty of strobe light on the bottom half. But when you edit, the likelihood is you'll probably have to darken the top half of the image and brighten up the bottom half of the image. That's just the way it will be. So you can use your camera to expose for the surface, and then use your strobes to expose for the bottom half of the image. And here's just a couple of shots from a few different places I've been. This gentleman here on the left in the water, I know that Paul knows this gentleman. His name is Peter, a good friend of mine. He has a rather large dome port here. I think this one is a 24-inch dome port. And then the two guys on the right here, this is Mehmet and my girlfriend Lauren when we were in Grand Cayman. One is using an 8-inch dome port, I think, and the other one is using a 24-inch dome port again. So size matters when it comes to splits. The bigger the dome port, the easier it is to manage the meniscus. And the meniscus is this line that comes across the frame. That's the name that we call it. You can also use floats for dedicated split shooting to keep the top half out of the water and make sure that you don't get any of these kind of droplet effects on the top half of the image. Now splits, you can use them quite creatively. So this one in the middle here, this is taken in the Red Sea. And we've used the sun to backlight the diver's head on the top half of the image. And for the bottom half of the image, we've actually used a strobe that's flashed onto the diver, and the diver is holding another strobe behind them and pointing it back at their own body. So when my strobe fires, it fires another strobe behind the diver, and we get this double backlighting effect of the sun behind the head and the strobe light behind the body. The one on the left here, this is actually incorporating like a Snell's window type of split feeling into it. And again, we're using strobe light for the diver, and then we're using an off-camera strobe to light the reef, and then we're burning in that sunset color on the top half of the image. The one on the right here, this again is just about telling the story of where you were. We were in the Maldives doing some kayaking, and it was really nice to capture the coral reef on the bottom half and capture the sunset on the top half and what the diver that was just on a surface interval doing some kayaking. Now you can use Snell's window, you can use remote lights, you can use many, many different techniques. But the key to doing a split is actually that there's something interesting happening on both halves of the images. Way too many people, they just get obsessed with wanting to take a split, but there's actually nothing on one half of the image. There's no point if there's nothing underwater, and there's no point if there's nothing above the water. So it's actually quite difficult to find a scene where you've got a really engaging top half and bottom half. Here's a couple more. Sunrise and sunset can be a great time to take split photos. So the one on the left was taken at sunrise, the one on the right was taken at sunset. Okay? You can see on the sunset one here, the water is quite black because we have a fast shutter speed, but not much ambient light coming through into the water, but we light it with the strobe light underneath. The one on the left is actually just taken with ambient light, so there's no strobe light on the bottom half, we're just exposing for the clouds on the top half of the frame. But it's using this f22. By using f22 and the manual focus, that's how you get both the top half and the bottom half always in focus without your camera trying to hunt underwater. And if you set it up on this way, you can shoot as fast as you want. You can take as many frames as you want in a super short period of time. Okay, schooling fish. So schooling fish are one of the most powerful subjects you'll encounter as a wide-angle photographer, and it's really important to learn how to photograph them properly and how to master it. If you have never been diving, there's probably not many things that are more engaging for my little 8-year-old nephew than seeing a huge school of fish. So when you're shooting a school of fish, it's about showing the size and the scale of the school. You're trying to show the power of the nature, the abundance of the fish. And you really need to think big when shooting these types of images. There aren't too many details to consider. It's more about the composition and being smart with your lighting. So have your strobes at their widest point. The bigger the school, the wider you want your strobes. On full power, pull nice and far back, okay? The bigger school, the further away the strobes will be, the wider the strobes, and the more power you need. Think about the sun as well. It is much, much easier to do this if the ambient light is coming from behind you and lighting the fish in front of you. Remember I showed you the sea lion shot before with the bait ball? Because I use the ambient light from behind me, the sunlight will always light the fish much better than your strobes can. So use the ambient light to your advantage if you can. Models are fantastic for schooling fish, okay? But only use them when the schooling fish is huge. Don't use a model when you've just got a small school of fish because it actually diminishes the effect of the schooling fish and makes them look much smaller. If you're going to use models, make sure that you're trying to show the scale. Always place the model to be facing the school as well. So the model needs to be looking at the subject of the photo. The model should always have a clean background as well. So you see in this photo here, the model has got a nice blue water background. They're not lost into the school themselves. You can also give the model a torch and have the torch pointing at the subject, which is the school of fish. Use F13, manage the blue with the shutter speed, but keep it fast enough to freeze the action, okay? So don't slow your shutter speed slower than say 1/100th, because then you won't get a super sharp school of fish. Instead of decreasing the shutter speed, increase the ISO as well. So raise your ISO, because what that will do, it will actually help you with the strobe light as well. So by increasing the ISO to get the right blue, you'll get a lot more strobe power onto the fish as well. A couple of examples here. So when you're shooting these kind of things, you don't want to fire your strobes and fire your camera time and time and time again. You need to work with the school of fish and shoot at the very peak of the action. So the barracuda here on the left, this was in a raging current in the Maldives, so there's a ripping current going straight across it. Currents are great for schooling fish because they keep them nice and organized in line. But I had to creep my way towards the school, bring my camera up, fight in the current, and shoot only when they came right into the frame for the peak of the action. Keep the schools nice and clean. A messy school makes for a messy photo. So all the schooling fish photos you'll see of mine, it's nice if all the fish are pointing in the same direction and everything's moving in one direction through the frame. And use the fish as part of your composition. Use diagonals and use the direction of the fish and use your model engaging with the fish as well. So these are smaller schools, so that's why there's no model involved when you're shooting a smaller school. But when you shoot the smaller school, you can start here like it is on the left with these sweet lips. It's not the most exciting photo in the world, but if you start to incorporate the other things that we've already learned, like some sun rays, or incorporate a bit of a Snell's window into your image as well, you'll take your schooling fish photos to the next level. Now for small schooling fish, such as chromis, fusiliers, anthias, all these kind of fish that live in the coral, you can actually use your breathing to control the fish. Okay, so if you ever see a photo of mine of chromis or anthias, it would always look like the fish in a super organized dome above the coral fish. The way you do this, you come up to the coral, you get yourself in a nice position, you take a test shot, check your exposures and your strobe levels, make sure everything's okay, then put the camera back up to your eye, you take a huge deep breath out as hard as you can. You go. The second you do that, all the fish will go into the coral. Immediately, 2 or 3 seconds, they will start to come out and they will come out in perfect synchronization. And then you fire your shot, okay? So don't just wonder what's going on in the fish, be all panicky with your breathing, all that kind of stuff. Use your own breath to control the position of the fish for the school. And that's what these first 2 photos here, the coral on the left and the chromis here on the right. Now you can shoot against the light when shooting schooling fish, but it's difficult, okay? Because your settings are going to be for the ambient light, and it means you need a huge amount of strobe power to light the fish. So these jacks here, this is taking a very shallow water in Cayman, but you can see the light is in front of the camera. We've clipped off the sunball like we discussed before. We've shot a nicer aperture in order to get the sunbeams in, but we needed a huge amount of strobe power in order to light the fish. And if we didn't have that nice, soft, even high quality, high power strobe light, all of the fish would just be a silhouette. Okay, off-camera lighting. So off-camera lighting can be a really powerful tool to add depth to your wide-angle images. The primary reason that you use off-camera lighting for wide angle is when the scene that you're working with is too big for you to light. Okay, so by using off-camera lights, you can light a much bigger scene and put some depth into the image as well. You can use them to highlight models in dark environments. You've all seen these cave diving images these days with the light behind the cave diver silhouetting the diver out. You can use them to highlight single individual parts of the bigger scene. So for example, you could take a photo inside a wreck with a truck, and you could put the light inside the truck to make that part of the image really pop out. You can put them in windows, you can put them in all sorts of different places in your image to make your image really pop. And again, it's about when the scene is too big and you can't light the whole thing, or you just want to draw the viewer into one specific part of the image. Now you have a choice between using video lights or off-camera strobes. The off-camera strobe will always offer you a lot more power and a better quality of light. And if you're going to use an off-camera strobe, then you need to use something like an anglerfish. So this is a small sensor plugged into your off-camera strobe. When I fire my main strobes on my camera, the sensor will see it and fire the other strobe for me. If you use video lights, they work very well in dark environments. So say you're in a cave or inside a wreck, the advantage of the video light is when you're using it, you can see where the light is going to fall. Okay, so you can lean it up into the right position and see the effect that the lighting will have. If you use a video light, it has the same effect as ambient light when it comes to shutter speed. So if you slow down your shutter speed with a video light, the video light will get brighter in your image. If you speed up your shutter speed, the video light will get darker in your image. And that's because the video light is on through the whole of your exposure. That's not the case for strobe lights. So strobe lights are instantaneous and they won't be affected by the shutter speed. Very important that you hide the video light or the remote camera light. Never allow the light head to be facing the camera because it will always be blown out and overexposed. And here's some examples. So the first one here on the left, this is taken in a deep trench here in Iceland. And we're using the remote strobe on a tripod pointed back at the diver. Okay, so the strobe is really close to them, pointing back through their legs, creating this starburst effect behind the diver. The one on the right, that's the opposite way around. So the strobe light is attached to the bottom of the diver's rebreather in this case and firing back behind the diver. The one in the middle here, this is incorporating a few of the techniques that we've learned so far. So we've got nice strobe light coming from my camera on the diver's face. We're using a slower shutter speed, which brings the ambient light through the window into the frame. So having that slow shutter speed, we're actually burning in the blue light through the window, okay? And then our third lighting source is the remote strobe. That is underneath, pointing down into the engine room. So if you look at the image now, you see the blue light coming through the window first, you see the strobe light from my camera on the diver's face, and then you see the remote strobe down into the engine room, lighting that part of the scene, okay? So by using all our different available light sources and balancing our exposure, we're going to get a much more three-dimensional photo. So these are both taken with video lights rather than strobe lights. The one on the top right first, this is quite a deep wreck. So this is the San Francisco Maru, which is in Truck Lagoon. It's around about 200, 220 feet dive, something like that. But the scene is too big for me to light with my strobe lights, okay? And I wanted to use video lights because it's a deeper dive. I can immediately see where the light is going and I can brighten them up with my shutter speed and darken them out as well. So by using these video lights, we really draw the viewer into the main subject of the shot in a way that you couldn't do with on-camera strobes. The one on the bottom left, this is definitely a dive for Paul, who loves cold water diving. This is the world's first dive inside a flooded ice cave. So this is a high altitude dive underneath a glacier in a flooded ice cave at 4,000 feet, something like that as well, that we were doing. And it was completely dark inside the cave. So we descended down in some abseiling into the glacier and then cave penetrated in to this flooded chamber. But it was completely black in there. So we used the video lights to light up the chamber. And this section here on the right side of the image that you see, that's actually a frozen waterfall. So that's where the water in the dry cave was dripping down and was freezing. And then in the spring, the whole of the cave flooded with crystal clear malt water. But the only way to shoot this was by using a lot of off-camera lighting and lighting up that dark scene, making it appear like it's super bright. All right, let's talk about motion blur, okay? So everyone always asks me about motion blur these days. There are a lot of opinions on motion blur. I will tell you though, there are a lot of people doing pretty average motion blur. So motion blur is a fantastic way to shoot if you get it right, okay? But it's very cool and very fashionable these days. Everyone's trying to do it, and a lot of people are posting a pretty average job, I would say, of motion blur. There's a famous British guy, his name is Nick Moore. I know that Paul knows him very well. He kind of made motion blur a lot more famous over recent years and won a lot of competitions with it and really mastered the technique and took it to a new place that nobody else had ever taken it. And as a result, it's highly fashionable. A lot of people are asking about it. But there are two types. So the first is the most authentic, and this is what we call motion blur as opposed to slow shutter. Motion blur in itself, the original idea of motion blur is actually to capture the movement of an animal. For example, the school of fish, or like you see this shark here on the left. We are trying to capture the feeling of motion in the image. That's what we're doing. So how do you do it? First, you slow down your shutter speed. So you need to be at a shutter speed of 1/4 of a second or slower. Some of my slow motion shutter speeds can be down as low as 1 second, okay? That is how you expose for the background, and then you use your strobe light to freeze the animal in one position. So if you think of it in this way, everywhere that your strobe light falls on the image will be super sharp and still. Everywhere your strobe light doesn't hit the image will be blurry, okay? And that's what we're trying to do. The slower the shutter speed, the more blur there will be in the image, okay? So because of that, we're going to open up this shutter speed, have it open for quite a long time. You need to do it when the ambient light is low. So you want to do it early in the morning, you want to do it late at night, or you want to do it when the sky is super cloudy. Think a day with thunderstorms and there's not much sunlight coming through. So these are the times to do it, okay? Now, due to using such a slow shutter speed, you're going to let in a lot of ambient light naturally. So that means you need to use f/18 or f/22 and a low ISO. That will block out the ambient light, so the blues are not overexposed. So set your camera up in this way, take a test shot, and make sure the blues are not blowing out. Slow your shutter down as much as you can before the blues start to become overexposed. The next step is the critical step, and this is what people are getting wrong when they're posting pretty average photos. It is about your strobe positioning and strobe power. Wherever the light falls on the subject will be sharp, so you need very delicate and very accurate strobe positioning. So if you take this photo here on the left, the only part of the image that is sharp and true is the face of the shark, and then it falls off into the distance. That's because the strobe light has only hit his face exactly where I want it, okay? In order to do that, I need to use a very high power strobe. So really on maximum power to get as much light in the place that I want to be frozen as I possibly can, and then very accurate positioning. So imagine here if the strobe light had hit the sand as well, and all the bottom half and all the sand of the image was super sharp. It wouldn't look right. It would look really bizarre. And that's what a lot of people are doing. They're throwing the light all over the scene, and then weird parts of the scene are sharp when they should be blurry. Now, there is something called shutter sync on your camera. Shutter sync means when I press the trigger, does the flash fire at the start of the exposure or the end, okay? Now, if you want the animal to create the movement in your image, i.e. the animal swimming through, you're following it, you press your shutter and you carry on following it, then you use rear curtain sync. I do not recommend that for doing this type of thing. I recommend that you use front curtain sync, because then when I'm tracking the animal and following him, when I press my shutter at the peak of the action, the flash will fire and it will freeze in where I wanted the exposure to be. If it freezes at the end of the exposure, I don't know where the animal is going to be, okay? So I track the animal, I press the trigger, the flash will fire, it stays open, and I drag my camera violently away from the subject. That is the secret, okay? Huge amount of strobe power, and drag your camera away from the subject in the direction it's swimming, okay? The other thing people do, they drag it the other way, and it looks like it's swimming backwards because it creates a weird effect with the motion blur. Or they're dragging the camera the correct way, but they're using rear curtain sync, and it's making it look like it's swimming backwards again. Okay. So to keep it simple for you, front curtain sync, 1/4 of a second shutter speed or slower, maximum strobe power. Compose your image, follow the fish through the scene, press it, hit it very hard with strobe, and drag the camera away. Okay? And that's the secret. When you review your images, you should be looking to see if parts of the frame are sharp that you don't want sharp. So have you thrown the light all over the sand? Have you thrown the light onto the coral that was next to the subject? You know, all these kind of things, because you only want to light the very front of the subject. So look at these two images here, okay? The school of fish here on the left. So what this was about, the school of fish were moving really fast. So by using this slow shutter speed, we've incorporated the movement into the scene, okay? You can see directly where the strobe lit has lit the center of the frame and fallen off towards the edge. We've got this lovely negative space in the direction the fish are swimming, okay? We've got a really beautiful feeling of motion through the scene, and the whole of the scene is filled right to the corner, making the fish school seem so huge because they're filling everything and they almost go on to infinity. Okay? The shark here on the top right, again, this was in bad conditions. So it's like it's a Tiger Beach in the Bahamas. It was like a stormy day and conditions were bad and the sea was rough and the texture wasn't very good and the ambient light was low. So by moving to a slow shutter speed, we're making these more three-dimensional action shots that you can't do when the sun is bright. And that's what we mean about making the decision. You know, when I dive Tiger Beach, I go down to the bottom. How is the viz? How is the light? Do I have some rays? Do I have some balls? Is it too dark? And I make my correct decision based upon what I see. With the shark, again, the strobe light is very well controlled. We haven't thrown the strobe light on all the fish in the background. They're all blurry. It's almost as if they're trying to swim out of the frame as fast as they can away from the shark. We've only put the strobe light exactly where we want it. Now, the next one is what we call zoom blur and spin blur. Now, I don't recommend that you take a whole bunch of these photos other than to learn and understand the light and the shutter speed and the way everything works, because it will really teach you all these kind of stuff. When you do this, you need to find a subject that's sticking up from the reef a little bit. So like this is an elephant ear coral that's sticking up. The classic is using a yellow sponge that's sticking up from the reef. Set your camera up in the same way as before, f22, low ISO, 1 second shutter speed. Take your test shot and check for the color blue, and then adjust your shutter speed so it's not too overexposed. Use front curtain sync. This doesn't work with rear curtain sync. The difference here now, set your lighting to inward lighting. So pointing back at the camera so that you're not firing light onto the ground below the coral. You're only firing it sideways onto the coral itself. Position yourself above it, compose the image how you want it. I compose it exactly how I want it, and I use the viewfinder for this, and not the one with the eye, the screen on the back of the camera. I get it how I want it to be in the frame, and then I move it a quarter of a turn back. I begin my rotation, and I press the shutter, and I carry on my rotation. And it will fire the flashes and freeze the subject exactly how I want it, and carry on with this lovely blur effect in the background as it goes through. For zoom blur, it's the same thing, but when you're using a zoom lens, like a 16-35 or something like that, you set your camera up in exactly the same way, but you have your camera lens at the widest point. As you press the shutter, you zoom in to the narrowest point, and it will create zoom blur through your image. So if you look at the image on the left, if you had the shutter speed set to 1/250th of a second, and you get the lighting right, it should look like this. And this is what we mean by inward lighting. I've only lit the tubes and the coral. There's no light has gone down onto the seabed, okay? Then I can change my shutter speed to a second, rotate my camera, take my test shot, and continue rotating through. The light will freeze the yellow of the coral, and the shutter speed will blur the background out for me. So it's a combination of multiple things. You need to have the right settings for your camera. You need to have the right lighting in order to create the inward lighting and combine those two things together. This is well worth you mastering, just so you really understand your camera, the light, and the strobe light and the ambient light, and then it's really easy for you to apply slow shutter photography to anything. One more example. This is just a turbostrayer. And again, this is just late in the afternoon when the ambient light is really low, a little bit bored on a dive. It's just fun to knock out one of these type of photos at the end. This one here on the right, this is actually shot in Silfrfisher in Iceland. And this is just us messing around for company marketing, trying to do some Halloween shots. So we had a pumpkin in all sorts of different places around Iceland. And I got designated with the underwater one. So you can see there's actually an off-camera light inside the pumpkin, and then I've just added a bit of zoom blur to make it a bit more of a Halloween feeling to the story. Now this is the final technique, and I've left it to last on purpose because it's really, really simple. Okay, so we've done all the complicated stuff. If you cast your mind back through my presentation now, you'll remember that there was usually text on one side of the presentation and a photo on the other. And it actually means many of the photos that were in this presentation are vertical images. Okay? Shoot as many vertical images as you can and do not forget about them. The vertical images are the backbone of magazine photography. Okay? Way too many people, all they're doing to create a vertical image is cropping 2/3 of the frame later on in their laptop. Do not be afraid to turn your camera into the vertical position and shoot and shoot and shoot. Having super high quality vertical photos will take your portfolio to a whole new level. And it's so simple to do and so often forget. Don't forget the Instagram story, the Instagram story is the modern day magazine, okay? Instagram stories are vertical photos, okay? Now it's really simple. When the subject or scene is taller than it is wide, you should be shooting verticals. Yet so many people are still trying to shoot horizontals. Take this crocodile, for example. This was shot in Cuba. I was there in February this year. And I literally had 10 seconds to shoot this photo. The crocodile was very small and swimming away really, really quickly. But the very act of me just turning it into a vertical, I got a photo where the crocodile fills the entire frame, whereas everyone else just had a little tiny crocodile just in the middle of their frame. Okay? Now they're easy to do. All you do is just you have your strobes in your 10 and 2 position, and you turn your camera 90 degrees. It's very nice if you have a 45-degree viewfinder like I do, and then as you look through it. The one thing that you have to remember though, is as you turn your camera 90 degrees, you're generally going to be shooting upwards a little bit. And what that actually means is the bottom strobe gets much closer to the subject than the top strobe. Therefore, you either need to turn the strobe on the top up or turn the strobe on the bottom down. So the bottom strobe should be about 2 clicks less power than the top strobe. Take your test shot and have a look to make sure you've got nice even lighting across the frame and adjust your strobe light accordingly. Okay, so the bottom strobe, less power than the top strobe, and then you'll get these lovely vertical photos. Okay, so it just depends on the angle of your camera. If you're going for a Snell's window, you're going to be angling further and further up. And that means that top strobe will get further away and the bottom strobe will get somewhere a lot closer. But I would start with 2 clicks difference, but you might need to go up to 4 clicks as well. Other than that, everything's the same, But pretty much everywhere you go shooting, you should always be shooting at least 1/3 of your images into verticals. And here's some more examples. You've seen some of these photos already throughout the presentation. The one here on the left. This scene here is much taller than it is wide. If this was a horizontal photo, all we're going to get is another 2/3 of the image, but all black. Okay. Same with this turtle here. By switching to a vertical, we're drawing the eye through the image straight across the frame. Okay. Same here. This is the engine room of the Kensho Maru in Truck Lagoon. By using this vertical photo, burning in the ambient light, using off-camera lights, combining all of our techniques together, we get very powerful images. Some of these you've already seen in the presentation. You saw this lit coral that's on the coral reef. So we're using inward lighting. We're using our sun rays and our sun balls, and we're managing them by putting the eye in the subject to create the backlighting effect, and we're using verticals. The one in the middle again, we're using this Snell's window kind of sunball effect. We're using our vertical lighting. And the one here on the right, again, we've got Snell's window, and we're using remote camera strobes. The combination effect of all these different techniques is what's taking the photo to the next level. So this is the final set of slides, you'll be pleased to know. Combining these techniques is the secret to creating depth in your images, okay? There are also hard and fast rules in underwater photography. People teach them all the time. I don't like the hard and fast rules. I like to have a really good understanding of the fundamental techniques and then understand when to apply them, but not be afraid to break those rules. People always teach, always shoot up. That's one of the first things you ever hear in wide angle, always shoot up. Well, it's not really true. It should be always shoot up unless it looks better from above. Okay. This shark photo here on the left, everybody was shooting this shark school in the same way. They were just swimming up to it horizontally and shooting the sharks as they swim past them in a circle. But think about the story of the image. The real story here behind these sharks is actually the number of sharks, the formation, and the fact they're circling this bommy. Okay, so by going up from above and shooting directly down and using an awful lot of strobe light, very wide and powerful strobes to light as much of the scene as I could, we have a photo that really takes us into a whole new level. It takes us away from everyone else's photos, gives us something new and unique and a new perspective. But more importantly than that, it tells the story of what we actually saw. So we broke the rules in order to tell the story. Okay. People often see me underwater, and at the end of the dive, they're like, what on earth were you doing over there, looking at the surface, doing that kind of thing, pointing your camera down there? But it's all about assessing the scene and applying the correct techniques that suit the conditions and tell the story the best. Okay. Here's a few more photos, just a couple to finish up with, and just why I took them in this way. So this photo here, this is a very deep wreck. It's called the Nippo Maru in Truk Lagoon. It's all about the ambient light. So we're at a depth here, you know, probably close to 200 feet when we're taking this photo, but we're still only using ambient light. By being the correct side of the wreck and understanding where the light is coming from, and we're still getting really good color and contrast out of the image even at those depths. This is Silver Fisher. This is my playground. We're using that directional light here again. So the light is coming in from the left. The story of the image, it's this crystal clear water in between tectonic plates. So we've got the dark plate and the light plate. We're using the light to our advantage. The model is connecting with the main part of the subject and looking directly at it for me. They're facing the same direction that the light comes. Okay? So we're balancing all these different techniques. This is the power of verticals. So I was in Mexico shooting this bait ball with all the mahi-mahi and the other fish that were eating them. Somebody on the surface shouted whale, you know. We literally had half a second and we realized there was a whale coming down from the deep blue straight into the bait ball. And everyone had the camera set up the same way. We were all shooting horizontal photos, but the very action of switching into vertical, I now have the whole whale in the scene. We've captured the sun rays that are coming from the midday sun, and we've got the whole scene into one powerful image. This would have been lost if we hadn't have had the foresight to switch into a vertical. The same here with these fish on the right. I'm not afraid to shoot down and use the strobes in a different way and use a vertical image. This is just a motion blur again. So this is just to show you, if you shoot the school of fish, use the motion blur. Use it because of the conditions, you know. We've got low ambient light here. We've got bad quality water. So the visibility is very bad. By using the motion blur, we're removing the problem with the visibility. By getting super close to the subject, we're removing that problem with the visibility. By going all the way to the edges of the frame and using the diagonal composition, the fish are naturally leading you through the frame, and you think the fish is so big because you don't know where the edge of the school is. All right, so it's really give us this incredible feeling of just how big this school of fish is. You can also use these lenses for portrait photography, just to remind you, because people think you can't. They think they're just for shooting big scenes. So this is a triggerfish in Egypt on the left side. And we can use these sort of wide angle zoom lenses to create really nice portrait photos. But again, shooting it in a vertical way, really nice accurate lighting. So we're only lighting the fish, we're not lighting any backscatter, and we really got that pop in the mouth with it getting straight into the scene. The one on the right again, it's about using a wide angle zoom to create something very different in a school of fish. So this was a messy school of fish. It was very unorganized. It was very difficult to shoot. But by zeroing in on one fish, lighting him very well, and actually breaking the rules of wide angle photography again by opening up the aperture so that we use depth of field to create a different type of image. This one here is, when you first look at it, you think it's all about the subject here in the foreground and the diver connecting with the subject, and that's all really nice and the lighting is good and stuff like that. But the secret of this rec photography is to use the ambient light. By opening up the shutter and slowing that shutter speed down, we're burning the ambient light in from the background, and these lovely blues that are coming in through the broken window and through the doorway, that's what taking the photo to the next level. If this photo just had a black background and nothing was seen in the back, which is the easiest way to shoot it, then we would not be in the same level of photo. This, again, it's about breaking all the rules of the wide angle photography. This was taken pretty much in the dark. So it's taken at f2.8, 6,500 ISO, and 1/10 of a second shutter speed, handheld in 36-degree water. Okay, so it breaks pretty much every wide angle rule that you're told about. The only lighting in here is off-camera lighting, but we're using that off-camera lighting to create a tunnel effect, to draw the viewer straight into the middle of the frame where the brightest point is. We backlit the diver. The diver is also using a torchlight shining across the frame, and also another one to light the surface up a little bit. And then we create this natural vignette through the darkest part of the image is where I am as the photographer. We draw you through the frame that way. Again here, this is the last one, I think, just to show you that you really need to use very good controlled soft lighting of your strobes, but very accurate strobe lighting. We've created this natural silhouette around the coral by only lighting the coral, none of the background behind it. Then we're using the Snell's window as well. So we're opening up the background by opening up the Snell's window and throwing our light forward so that we get light from the front of the frame all the way onto the diver's face in the background. Now, make sure that you tell the story and assess the scene. The technique that you should employ should be relative to the scene and the story. One of the worst things you can do as a wide-angle photographer is use technique just for the sake of technique. Making slow shutter speed photos just for the sake of using a slow shutter speed makes no sense. Taking poorly executed technique shots just because you want to show that you can do these kind of shots makes no sense. The technique needs to add value to the image or the story. Don't just use technique for the sake of technique. Assess your scene, begin with the ambient light, understand what you're trying to shoot, and decide what techniques best suit the conditions. Never ever decide the technique before you go for the dive, because many people will tell, I'm going to do slow shutter, I'm going to do this dive. Until you understand what the conditions that you're working with and the story that you're trying to sell, then you don't know what technique you should apply. That said, please go and master the techniques. The only way to master them is to practice them, okay? So that is when you decide before the dive, I'm going to learn this technique. I'm not going to stop till I do learn it. That will then mean you're very quick to execute the techniques when you need to. Any one of these techniques, I will set my entire camera up and all the settings and have everything done in less than 30 seconds and be ready to capture the magic moment. So think big, shoot huge scenes, and tell the story of what you see to non-divers. If anyone wants to contact me, my email, byronadventures.com. My Instagram is just here. And then this is the QR code and the website for my newsletter. If you would like to subscribe to that, it's just InsideScuba.online. So any questions, guys?
First of all, amazing images and packed presentation. So
a lot going on there.
Thank you for that. Really amazing.
Yeah.
Almost makes me want to shoot in cold water. Almost.
Almost. Yeah. Yeah, I'll take that small victory ball. So any questions, guys?
So going back to the shark shot, when it was in, I think, slow motion, did you have one strobe or two strobes on the shark's head?
So I never shoot with one strobe. I always have them with me.
Okay.
And I'm using two really high-powered strobes. You know, like you've seen my strobes when we were in Scotland. Yeah. But you're trying to create really nice, soft, even, consistent lighting across that frame. So by having two strobes, that's definitely the way to go. What you can do though with two strobes is use reduction rings. So these are a ring that goes on the edge of a strobe, and they just stop the beams from being so crazy wide. Usually you want wide and soft beams, but sometimes if you're trying to make it very accurate, like with the slow motion stuff, maybe a little reduction ring is a good way to go.
Okay, great.
All right.
So I had a question. So when you talk about reduction rings, one of the pictures you showed near the end of your presentation was a fish where the fish in the middle was lit and all the fish in the ring around it were not lit. Did you use a reduction ring for that?
I did not. They were lit in the background because they did have the red color to them, but it's not. A little bits in post production, maybe with a vignette in post production, just to bring
Hmm.
it down on the background a little bit. But they definitely had some light on, otherwise they wouldn't have the red effect on it, you know. But
Is that how all the ones around it were darker? Was it that just in Photoshop or?
there is a bit of a vignette done in post
Yeah.
production, just
Okay.
to darken the edge a little bit.
Okay.
And I actually use in Lightroom. There's something called a radial filter. I don't know if
Hmm.
you've ever used it. Very often, if you take a radial filter and you can make them elongated or full circle, put it over your subject and then invert it, and it will just allow you to darken up the area around your subject. So it's a great thing to do. It works very well with slow motion photos as well, you know. So if you just have the radial filter on your subject, you can choose to darken the background or brighten the actual subject as well. But the actual secret to that photo is the f-stop. So by using a shallower depth of field than you would normally do in a wide lens,
Hmm.
that's making the other fish much more blurry.
Yeah.
That's actually the real secret because I can't really change that in post production.
Yeah. So the other thing I was wondering, can you say a little bit more about the vertical shots? You talked about how it sounded like you only had like a second for that crocodile shot or the whale shot, but you also talked about changing the relative power of the front versus the back strobes,
Yeah.
which would take a few seconds. So
Well,
uh,
the whale first of all is just ambient lit, so there's no strobes on for it.
okay,
But
okay,
if you think about it like this, because I'm telling you and I know that I'm going to turn the bottom stroke down 2 clicks.
yeah,
I just know that. As I'm turning it, the first thing I do is I turn my viewfinder, 2 clicks, I'm done. It'll
yeah,
take
okay,
in 2 seconds to do it. But it's the very fact that you know that. Like if you're not
yeah,
thinking in your head and you're not going into it with that idea, that's when you get the uneven exposures and so on and so forth. And the more you practice this, I know that from 2 feet or from this angle, it's going to be 2 clicks or it's going to be 3 clicks. I will literally, if I'm swimming towards a subject, change it on the way and have the first shot will be fine. You know? But it's all
but
practice. You know?
yeah. The other question I had about the verticals was I thought some people like when you tilt it, you're instead of 2 and 10, you've got one sort of that's lighting from the bottom. Do you ever try to reposition the strobes, or you're okay with one of them being below the lens?
So you could in theory put them at 3 and 9, you know, which would be exactly in the middle of your port. So if you
Yeah,
turn 3 and 9. For
right.
me, using really high quality, super soft, wide strobes like I am,
Yeah,
probably an inch difference in the movement here.
yeah,
You're not going to see it in the image because you're going to be so close to the
yeah.
scene. So I don't worry too much about that. I'm very happy to shoot my 10 and 2.
You don't reposition the strobes when you go vertical.
Not I don't need to. No, I would do if I needed to, but I don't see it in my images and think it's fine.
Yeah. Okay.
The reason I don't use 3 and 9, just so you know, is generally when you're shooting horizontal photos, you don't want
Yeah.
to put too much light on the lower half, which is usually the seabed or something like that. So I just have them a little bit higher for that reason. I like to throw the light a bit further forward, you know. But the strobes are just such good quality, you're not even going to notice if they're an inch out on this way. You
Mhm.
Okay.
know? Oh, anything else, guys?
Yeah, I wondering what do you use to trigger your remote strobes?
So there's something called an anglerfish. If you Google anglerfish, basically like what it is it's a little tiny sensor. It's about this big, um, and it's just a battery inside, and it's got a fiber optic plug on the one side. So you plug a fiber optic cable into it, run that cable to your strobe, just exactly the same as you do from your housing to your strobe. Okay. If you position this anglerfish so your camera can see it, run the cable and hide the strobe somewhere else, wherever you want, pointed at a wall or something. When I fire my strobes on my camera, the sensor sees it and it fires the other one for me. It's called an anglerfish. It's very, very easy to use. Yeah.
And the other question I had, my computer glitched, but how do you get the fish to behave what you want by using your breath? My computer glitched. I couldn't quite catch that.
So any fish that live in the coral, so think red seal, years, or think green chromis. You get your camera up nice and close, done all your test shots, you're happy with your exposure, you're happy with your lighting. When you're up super close, about to take it, you take a huge deep breath out, like this, and all the fish will jump straight into the coral. That's where they hide. Just imagine if like a shark came into the scene, they would all hide in the coral.
Okay.
You just stay there, relax, and then they will all come back out. But when they come out, they will come out in perfect formation every single time, guaranteed, guys. Yeah.
All right.
They just come out in a wonderful dome across the coral, and then you take your shot and you're good.
That's a great tip. I've
Yeah.
noticed that too, how they scramble into the coral and then they come back out, but I seldom have the patience to wait for them to come back out.
There you go. It's all about the patience and just the
Yeah.
peak of the action, as they say.
Great. Great
Cool.
show.
My pleasure. Thank you for asking me, Linda, as well. It's because we met
Thank
in the
you.
Islands, so thank you.
Hey,
so-
Byron, I know that. Oh, sorry, Linda. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm so glad you could stay awake for this, Byron.
But I hope that you can see, even at 3 o'clock in the morning, I have a real passion for talking about it, and it's just
Yes, yes.
that excites me as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's been one of the most educational wide angle instructions I've gotten in a long time.
Oh yeah, we've never
Wow.
had anything like this before.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well,
Yes.
just so you all know, I can do this for macro in 6 months or a year's time if you want it as well. So I can do
All right.
Okay.
macro, creative macro. That's very
And
difficult.
I'd like to put a plug in for the InsideScuba.online. Great magazine. Check it out.
Greatly appreciate it.
Yep. I've ever since my trip, I've been getting it and reading it and learning a lot.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you.
So,
Mhm.
Byron, I do know from personal experience that you do a macro focused workshop. Do you do a wide angle focused workshop as well?
So next year I'm going to do one in the Red Sea that are sold out, but I think I'm going to open up one in Raja Ampat and potentially the Red Sea again in 2027. But the best thing to do is subscribe to the newsletter because it is non-biased and non-affiliated. However, I will inform people of my own trips through the newsletter when they come up. That's kind of what I will do with it. Just because it's nice to tie it all in together and the subscribers get to know when they come out. So I have I have a double trip in Lembe next year. There's a few spots left for the macro workshop in Lembe because I've got two back to back. The first one sold out, but then the rest of them will be in 2027 after that.
Excellent.
All right.
Absolutely awesome, Byron. Fantastic presentation. Thank you for joining us this evening or this morning for you as it is. And certainly appreciate the presentation for us today. So we'll let you go get some sleep and won't hold you up any longer.
Thank you very much, guys, and feel free
Thank
to
you
shoot
again.
anything. And good luck in the competition, all of you. So good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for staying up late.
Yep.
Bye bye.
Okay, bye.
Okay. And now we're going to